Strictly Creative. Our guest today is Rise Ashen, aka Eric Vanny. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, brother?
How goes it?
It's great, man. Just making do, doing what we can.
Right on, brother. So I have a series of questions that I'd like to start asking you. Right from the
Sounds
top,
good.
I'd like to know, over the years, what three keywords or themes have defined your creative path, purpose, and passion?
That's a good question, man. But I think the main theme has just been learning. I would say that's really the key thing. And I was blessed to grow up with some very old school Italian grandparents who they came from the old country. They grew up on a mountain, and they had this saying in Italian. It's imparate l'arte e mettelo a parte, which means learn the art and then just keep it, just set it aside and keep it. So their philosophy was always whatever you can learn, just learn it, and just it'll always be with you, kind of thing. So I think that's the main thing is my mother, she calls herself a lifelong learner. She's in her 70s, and she's pretty fluent in Chinese. She's learning calligraphy. She's doing she's got black belt in Aikido. She's she trains every day, like, so she's a real inspiration for me. And so I'd say that's the main theme, is like learning stuff, and then from that, learning a bunch of different stuff. I think we sell ourselves short a lot of the times of how much we can learn in life and how much we can get done. There's that saying, it's not that life is short, it's that we waste so much of it.
Fully agree. That's fascinating. Can you tell me which part of Italy are your grandparents from?
They're from a little village about an hour south of Rome. So the province it's in Latina, which is the Provincia di Latina, and it's close. It's in between Rome and Naples, basically. So it's starting to be kind of in that southern area. It's just north of the area called Campania, which is it starts to get a little bit crazy when you go a little further south. So it's still kind of a little bit normal, but you do have to sign an insurance policy that says that you a disclaimer for your insurance that says if you drive into Campania, then nobody's responsible for what happens to your car. So
wow. That's fun. Now, just wondering, I saw a video that you put out recently, and it's a really cool video. I'm going to share it, with this interview as a comment. And this is why I wanted to talk to you, because in this video, you really captured something fascinating as far as, sound and movement. And the question I want to explore is, tell us the story as to how you were first introduced to the study of movement, initially via hip hop culture, and influenced by martial arts and judo. Because I found I really enjoyed the video. I'll say that again, and
awesome, man.
I hope people will check it out. But I loved how you integrated movement, dance, and music, and combat sports, and internal arts, as far as meditation and breath and yoga and all that. So just tell us about that story.
Well, I mean, those two worlds have always been related. I mean, it's not just, I just stumbled into both of those things kind of concurrently around the same time. And so it was in the 80s when hip hop was first, really making its way north, because it started later. It started later in the 70s in New York. But then by the time it migrated north, it was about early to mid 80s by the time we kind of got it. I kind of got it anyway. So it was with my friends in Montreal. So I was living in a very it's a neighborhood called NDG in Montreal, very multicultural, people from all over the world. And my best friend, his dad was Jamaican. He was a DJ. So, he had an incredible record collection. I'd go down there and always be hearing music, So, he was into Jamaican music mostly, but also into West African music, a lot of the, Afrobeat stuff that was coming out. And so I got exposed to that music. And around that time, we started hearing this really radically different sound. And to me, what it sounded like was like, it was like an electronic version of the funk music that was going on in the US. And so, hearing that stuff was just like a mind-blowing, combination for me. So, I was really drawn into that sound. And then we started kind of piecing together that this dance was going on. And, it's funny because I've gotten this story of the origin story of hip hop from a lot of my dance mentors. Like I mentioned Bravo LaFortune in the video, he and Archie Burnett, these guys were dancers. They were street dancers. They were club dancers before hip hop started. So they're substantially older than I am, and so they've told me the origin stories of hip hop. But it's always the same theme of like when it started happening, it was just this insane explosion of creativity and explosion of style and fashion, And so when I started getting into it, it was through movies like like Beat Street and Break In. Those movies just really were the because there was no internet, so it was really the only way that we could get it was through the. I mean, there was the scene in Flashdance where there's where the b-boys are in Flashdance. So and we saw that, and we saw Beat Street and Break In, and we were just fascinated. So we would just imitate it, So we started getting together with friends. There was a few crews that kind of started forming. We'd have little battles, and we would be outside. We have our cardboard outside, and we'd be dancing, putting hats out for change and stuff. And we just like immersed ourselves in New York City dance culture as much as we could without the internet, it's a very different landscape now for dancers. But an interesting thing in terms of those two worlds and how they're connected is that I found out later from some of the old school heads in New York that there had been a Shaolin group that had been on tour in the late 70s through New York, and they had toured all around Manhattan. They had done a bunch of shows in Manhattan, and that's where a lot of the b-boys, the original b-boys, first saw like head spins and a lot of the the Shaolin move where they go back and do a headstand to a front flip, headstand, front flip, so it's like a lot of those moves were kind of there. But then, I've seen old footage from like the 40s and 50s of Nigerian dancers, and they're doing a lot of the same kind of moves too. So, I mean, there's only so many ways that the human body can move. And ultimately for me, all movement and dance all comes back to Africa. I mean, we're all from Africa, so it's like a lot of the original, a lot of the African cultures still have these indigenous local dances that showcase some of the same virtuosity of movement as well. So, but anyway, just an interesting parallel between those two things, because you're drawing the parallel between those two worlds. And so around the same time in the 80s, when I was 7 years old, my mother brought me to a guy called Monsieur Gay in Montreal, and he was a judoka. And he had a little club that he would run out of our school where I was going to school. And so I got to be exposed to some of the Japanese, formalized, ritualized movement as well. And so I did judo with him for, I think it was like 3 or 4 years. And that was pretty mind blowing as well. So it was kind of getting those two influences at a very early age. I was blessed to kind of get a window into it. And, not that I studied it full time since then, but I had a bit of a break in high school because when my family moved to Ottawa, and I got, there was just nobody who was doing that dance or movement here. And so eventually I got into Taekwondo as well, and when I was in high school. And so it kind of kept a foot in that. But it was only after I started clubbing when I was 19 that I got back into the dance full on. So
that's interesting. When you guys, when you transitioned from Montreal to Ottawa, it sounds like you were very creatively immersed in Montreal as a kid, right? You were dancing, you were doing judo, and so on. How did you find Ottawa? You moved in here in Ottawa in like the 80s?
Yeah, it was 89 and I was 14 years old. So, going into high school, and it was a radically different environment. Plus the whole being in a Francophone environment, very multicultural Francophone environment to, a very Ottawa, and Ottawa's changed a lot since then. I mean, it's a much more colorful city. There's a lot more cultures coexisting together. There's a lot more stuff going on. There's just more people too,
Right.
But yeah, it was definitely a departure from it. And I always kind of felt a little bit other because I had this other life over there. But it was always kind of percolating inside me. And through the music, I was kind of able to make my way back into the world of the music and the arts that I love so much. So.
In the video, you say something really interesting, and I just want you to kind of elaborate. When you say something on like being in between traditional music and the technically driven underground music. What does that mean, having both of those?
Yeah. Listen, I think that's basically what hip hop started out as. I mean, it's something very different now, but when hip hop first started, to me, one of the major factors in it was the confluence of the technology that was coming out of Europe. So, I mean, everybody knows Kraftwerk, the group Kraftwerk, but they were quite seminal in how they were using the instruments. For example, the Roland drum machines that everybody, the 808, everyone's always talking about 808 sounds, right? Like that type of drum synth, that was invented as an accompaniment machine for polka music, you know, boons, 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 which is also same beat as disco, right? It's a 4 on the floor beat. But you know, those machines were not initially, like, they had no idea that they were going to revolutionize music with it, right? So when those machines started coming out, and it was DJs like Frankie Knuckles and places like the Warehouse in Chicago and in New York, all the different clubs where underground music started, where they started using those instruments in a non-traditional way, you know, to make funk music, basically, to make American dance music. And that clash of the two things, you know, the more traditional sounding music with the electronic music combined together, is what creates this thing. I don't know, I can't explain why, but it just grabs me. Like it's the music that just makes me go bug out, you know. Like I love hearing, and especially the more ancient forms of traditional music, the ancestral musics, you know, be it West African music, but indigenous music from all over the world, you know, like you know, even South American, Latin American music, just the combination, reggae, even, you know, all the, and there are other genres as well that have come from that, you know. I mean, it's something about the mixing of the cultures, something about the mixing of the different approaches to the technology. I find it so rich and so interesting. It's just this limitless palette of sounds where you have, you know, these traditional instruments that have a rich culture and a rich, how would you say, like a curriculum almost, or you know, like a pedigree of techniques and modes of playing and ways of playing, and then you combine that with a fresh outlook on the sound perspective. To me, it just, like, it's so fascinating, right? It's like cumbia, for example, you know, it's like a mix of the three different, like, you've got the European music, you've got the indigenous music, and then you've got the African music, and the three of them together create this new thing, and it's cumbia. But then you take cumbia and then you combine it with an 808, and it just becomes this whole other world. There's something about that, the precision of the electronic realm, when you combine that with some of the groove elements and the, you know, like the swing and stuff that you can do as a human being, but then you combine it with the precision of the machine, and it just creates this whole other world, you know. So yeah, it's a very fertile ground for experimentation as an artist, right?
In as far as that experimentation, it's interesting because it sounds like you've really opened yourself up to a whole world of music, a whole world of culture, language, and so on. And how has that creative pursuit of a particular sound, vibe, energy, etc., how has that framed your, like, your perception of the world and your worldview and values? Because you know, not many people expose themselves to such a wide variety of genres, for example, right? And dance forms, and do that sort of research and explore and try to understand. So how has that exposure and research and immersion and play, how has that framed your worldview and values, or has it not?
Yeah. Oh, it has, for sure. I think you know, I mean, my old friend Trevor Walker, who you know as well, right, from the Mercury Lounge days. So I mean, he and I, we spend a lot of time together. We've made records together. We're working on a record together right now. And I mean, he's even further deeper down the rabbit hole than I am in terms of his record collection and his taste. And I mean, he's got an incredible amount of records. I've helped him move his records, you know, from one house to another. And it's ridiculous. Like, we had to rent a cube van and we had 5 guys to move his record collection, you know? Wow. So, I mean, there's so much music out there, and to just, like, to me, it's so mind blowing. I mean, even, you know, just taking one record, you know, like one record. I've been working on this dance piece recently, and I'm sampling from this record, and it's got the old school liner notes in it. And, you know, I started reading it. It took me like 20 minutes just to read the notes, you know, and I mean, the depth of the amount of knowledge and culture that's involved in some of the records, making them. And, you know, in the description, it talks about, you know, who the recording engineer was, how they got to Tibet to record this particular temple that they were recording at. And I mean, then they start talking about the traditions and the sect of Buddhism that they were studying. And, like, I mean, the amount of culture that's out there is unbelievable. And I think somehow with all this technology that we have, there's a little bit of that. Well, there's a lot of it that's getting lost. It's we've never had so much data, and we've never been so ignorant in a lot of ways, you know? So I find, you know, listening to records is a phenomenal way to just immerse yourself in culture, man. I mean, like, any record you pick up, and even local records, you pick them up, and if you get deep enough into it and you try to understand the messages in the songs, and then you do some reading on the artist and you figure things out. I mean, each artist is on this sacred journey of trying to embody their vision of the divine, and so yeah, it's music is it's like an endless journey of learning and appreciating culture. There are records that when I first heard them, I was like, they were so foreign to me that, I couldn't make the mental leap to have an effective response, like an emotional response to it, but now, years later, I just listen to it and I want to cry when I listen to some of them, because it's such a profound connection to some of them. So I think it's just a continuous, as a musicologist or a DJ or whatever you want to be, whatever you want to call yourself, somebody who loves music, it's a never-ending process of opening your mind to understanding cultures. And I think what comes from it is and more becoming more and more open to all humanity as a beautiful expression of what we are. It's like the ultimate anti-racism is like, just listen to music, just listen to everybody's music, and you see how everybody's all the same. Like we're one people, really, we're one people, and it's it's a shame. I think a lot of this technology has made the landscape more divided than ever, has made people more have more blinders on than ever in some ways. In some ways we're exposed to so much, and we have opportunities, so many opportunities, but in other ways, like, it's really dividing us. And certainly the way that people are consuming music, companies like this Spotify, I refuse to even go on there. Like, if somebody sends me a Spotify link, I just don't even go there anymore, because it's to me, it's such a degradation of the way that we're supposed to consume music. Like, it's awful, and not to even talk about the business side of it, but just like, I started noticing about when Spotify started about 10 years ago, and people were telling me what they're listening to, and I was like, well, who's the artist? They're like, oh, it's this playlist called whatever. And I was like, what, this chillax playlist or whatever that you listen to? And like, this is what you listen to? It's like, your channel is called chillax or whatever. And I'm like, seriously, like, you don't even know the name of the artist? Like, you have no idea what you're consuming, like, I mean, doesn't it bother? For a long time, I've had this folder on my computer where it's like, if I don't know the name of the artist, then I'll just put it in this folder, because I can't bring myself to play it out. Because as a DJ, you're playing and people will come up to you and say, hey, what is that song? I really like the song. I want to get it. If I can't tell you what it is, I can't play it, So to me, it's very important to understand what it is that you're listening to, right? And I mean, let alone playing music where I don't stand behind the lyrics or the content 100%. Like, I have to be cool with the music that I'm playing. Otherwise, I just can't represent it out. I can't spread those messages, It's, the Fela Kuti quote, he goes, when the gift of musicianship is given, it must be well used for the good of humanity. So, I really take that to heart. I've always taken it to heart. It's, we have a responsibility as artists, no matter what you are, dancer, DJ, producer, vocalist, poet, writer, like, be careful what you put out there, because we have this system called mirror neurons, the mirror neurons. And they're like, it's in our minds, we have these neurons that are designed to help us copy things that we see. So it's the monkey see, monkey do, right? So, violent TV, like Fortnite, like, I can't get behind it. It's like, if we're trying to create a better world, then how can we be consuming this art that's propagating these messages that are, detrimental to the common good, right? So
how much music education do you, or like, because you interact with people as a DJ and so on, how much of that sort of music education and engagement do you do with people in general? And I ask that because what you're saying is really interesting, because you're right. A lot of people don't know the name of the artist. They might not understand the context as to why this music was created, in terms of the history and that background. For someone like yourself, as a musician, as a DJ, and so on, you dive into that aspect, and you try to get the whole picture. I would imagine the whole sound. So with that knowledge, how much of that engagement do you do, generally speaking?
Well, I think there can be different levels of it. I mean, I'm not going to be preaching. Like
Right,
I've
right.
constantly been told my whole life, like, stop preaching, because I'm always on this mission to like share this stuff, but so something as simple as, for example, if you're a DJ, like, make a track list for heaven's sake. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you're sharing this music. The whole point is just you're trying to share this. Don't keep it secret. I mean, like, share, let people like delve into it, let people look up the artist if they really like a song, right? I mean, I come from a time where we would literally dub tracks off of the radio when it's just like you want to capture that thing, but you want to know what it is that you're capturing, so you can research, you can find if the artist has more. So that's one thing. But then any chance I get, I mean, I'm not sure if you know, but I've done a few podcasts as well. I have 8 episodes that I've done, but they're long form.
I've seen it's incredible content actually, and it's that sort of engagement. I think you do provide that because of
Hmm.
I've watched some of the interviews, and you dive deep into the nitty gritty in a really engaging way, and it
And
goes.
so are you, right? So like I think it's important for us as artists, and yourself as an artist, you're doing this to to just kind of open the door a little bit and let people peek into it, because I've noticed that a lot of times, and I was making this mistake as well for a long, I'm still making the mistake in a lot of ways, but we keep, as artists, we like to keep our processes to ourselves. And I think we're so focused on creating the content or delivering the final message that oftentimes I think we sell the public short of the beauty of the process in the art. You know what I mean? So I've been trying to embrace the narrative portion of it a lot more. That was part of me making that video. I've had this idea for a long time. Like, I want to explain to people what I'm doing, because like oftentimes we're like, oh, music's so great or whatever, but I know they're not witnessing the greatness that much. They're seeing the beautiful end product, which is great, and I'm proud of the end product. I love putting it out. But I think, and especially with the pandemic in the last year, I've been feeling like this need to share with people more, like, what I'm actually up to, and it's so yeah, I think it's important for artists to share what they're doing. And I forget who the artist is, but there's this quote, and it was like, the greatest gift that one artist can give to another is to just do their art, like, just do your thing 100% and show it to the others as you're doing it, so that they can see what you're up to. And for me, my inspiration has come from like an artist like, you remember Juan Carlos Noria? You remember him? He's a painter.
Yes, yes, yes.
So he lived here for a long time, and he's actually painting my album. He lives in Barcelona now.
Okay.
He's actually painting my artwork for my next album that's coming out. And but I remember watching him paint, and just like, I have several of his pieces hanging around my house, and I'm still, even 15, 20 years later, I still look at some of these pieces every day, and I just marvel at his artistry. Like, I literally, it transports me to another world where I'm like, the way he's recontextualizing things, the way he's sampling, how he's interpreting the world. It's like, that's what artists do. We take all the stimulus, and then we just like filter it, and it comes through us. Part of it is unconscious, part of it is just happening. We're just like a vessel, like we're trying to be this good vessel, and then the other part of it is like, we're consciously bringing a new world into being. So it's beautiful, man. So like, I mean, I think, yeah, like, I try to preach about it, and I try to talk about it, but at the same time, also, sometimes the best way to share that message is to just do it, like, just do the art.
That's interesting. Like, because the sharing and the quote unquote the preaching, I think there's a real need for both. Because you mentioned a lot. You've mentioned the technology and how that's kind of the access to all this data is making it very challenging for people, maybe to some extent, to maybe appreciate the full scope, because we're just inundated with so much, be it music, be it regardless of the art form or genre, or even sports, if you're a sports fan, or any sort of content. There's just so much out there. But I wanted to know, in particular, when it comes to your process, over the years, how has your creative process evolved, or has it evolved?
Oh yeah.
And speak to us about that in relation to sound and movement,
Yeah.
because in the video you mentioned, and we'll get into martial arts later on. But I found that whole yoga and martial art aspect fascinating, because we don't hear a lot about internal arts, you know, and how relevant they are to movement and life and energy, right? And
it's amazing.
It is, and it's fascinating because it's you know, you're in the video, you're kind of tying it in full circle. So I guess to go back to the question, what is your creative process and how has it evolved over the last couple of years and so on?
Well, my creative process is always evolving for sure. I think it's getting better. I think, you know, I would say that, you know, there are many different types of artists. I would be 100% an experimental artist. So I don't set out typically with an idea in mind. And this is like, I really thrive and I really enjoy collaborating with artists. And I marvel at all of the different approaches that I've been able to coexist with. I mean, in the late 90s, I went to school at Fanshawe College, it's the oldest recording school in North America. So there were 60 people that were in my class, or my year, because there were two sections of 30. And so of those 60 people, I got to collaborate with all of them. And over those 2 years, I mean, you literally are exposed to 60 different ways of creating, you know, and every artist I've worked with has a different process, and every artist has a certain amount of attachment to the vision of the end product that they have in mind. And I try to have no attachment to it. I try to do it like a Buddhist, you know, or like a yogi. Like, it's like, you know, just get rid of your preconceived notions. Try to avoid desires in the process, avoid fixations, and just be open to what comes through, you know, like try to like a mystical process, you know, just try to release into the process and just be open to what happens. So I mean, that's kind of where my perspective has been leading, and it's just becoming more and more like that as I work. And but in terms of the martial arts and the music, I mean, like, they're two related journeys, but they also have, for me, they're two different worlds as well. And I would say, you know, first of all, internal martial arts changed my life completely. I went from somebody who had a chronic lung problem to being able to completely cure my lung problem. And basically, my kung fu teacher, when I met him, he saw me, and he was like, literally like scanned up and down me like this when he met me, and he smiled. He's like, "Oh, I can fix you," you know? And I was like, whoa, like, I knew he was right. And he's like, "You train my way." He's like, "In 1 year, you throw your puffers out." And I was like, it's like, okay, like, I'll try, but there's no way you're going to do this for me. And he completely was right. And I have never touched that stuff since then. And it's been 20 years now, you know? I mean, the breathing exercises. And okay, so like with martial arts, as you know, the world of martial arts was turned on its head in the last 15 years, right? So UFC, MMA has completely changed the world, right? But what a lot of people don't consider is that all of the cultural styles, okay, so all of the very area and culture specific genres of martial arts that have evolved over the years, a lot of times, you know, you'll see, you know, especially 15 years ago, you used to see judo versus BJJ versus karate, which is better, you know? It's like, which is better at what? At playing the game that you've now come up with, which is a new context where you're not allowed to kick. You're not allowed to kick them in the nuts. You're not allowed to grab the face. You're not allowed to stick your finger in their eyes. You're not allowed to spit. You're not allowed to do all these things. So it's just a different, you know, it's not that judo or BJJ or silat or you know, whatever style is better. It's just more adapted to this current, you know, how we've decided in our current American, you know, cultural view that is the right way to fight, right? So that's the first thing I'll say, is that I think a lot of people have written off all these beautiful cultural styles that, of course, they're not, you know, they might not be the most effective at disarming a weapon, or they might not be the most effective at, for female self-defense or whatever application that you're deciding is important to you. But it doesn't take away from the fact that they have some beautiful elements to it. And to me, some of the most beautiful things that came out of Wudan, which is where the internal martial arts came from, and principally I would say Xingyi, Bagua, and Tai Chi. So those three, the way that they approach the cultivation of the chi, the internal energy, is just like it's a science that's so deep. And some of the exercises that come up, and it grew out of yoga. Like that's the thing, that all of this stuff came from Shaolin Temple. And before Shaolin, it was a yogi, like Damo, who was the original monk. He was a yogi, and so he came from India. He's Indian. When you go to Shaolin, you can see statues of him, and he looks Indian, like he's got an Indian face. Mm-hmm. And so, some yoga goes back 9,000 years, right? So, I mean, a lot of these styles, like now, it's like it used to be. There was a Kung Fu, there would be all these little, judo, karate. There was all these different styles. Now everything's BJJ everywhere, right? And BJJ and Muay Thai. So that's it. Those are the only two things. That's the way you got to defend yourself, right? So anyway, it's kind of funny, right? Like, I mean, you're a martial artist. You train all the time. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So, but that said, I mean, okay, whatever. It is what I still think it's good that people are exposed to all these combat arts, and that I still think MMA is great, and I love watching it. I think it's just like, the level is like, like now and then I'll just catch a UFC fight and I'm just like, oh my God, like it's so mind blowing how the people are moving, Right. So it's amazing. But that said, all of the little traditional styles to me have so much beauty, and like you can get so much in the training. It can move you so much, and it can teach you so much about movement, and you can learn so much through these little, they're very specific to the area. Look at, for example, some of the Okinawan karate, or like, a lot of the little subsects of substyles of Kung Fu, they're so specific, right? But look at how beautiful they are, and how much you can learn when you go into. I don't know if you've ever taken some of those styles or studied a little bit. Some of the Filipino stick fighting, or like,
right.
Or the Kalari Patu, the Indian martial arts, like they're so culturally specific, and there's so much culture trapped in them, but they're the best way that people found to defend themselves from the threats and the way that people were attacking them at the time, right? And so I think it's amazing to be able to study some of those and to grow through them. And specifically for me, the one that's had the biggest impact has been specifically the breathing exercises related to Xingyi and Bagua, which all also grew out of Shaolin initially. So it's opened a huge door for me in terms of how to train. And as I said, the health benefits have been unbelievable for me. So
it's funny because a lot of these martial arts have healing modalities mm-hmm. in them. If it's just meditation, if it's the breath, if it's, I'm simplifying it here. I'm generalizing and simplifying it, but essentially they're martial arts, but they're also healing arts.
Absolutely.
And some of the current styles that just focus more on sports fighting. I've kind of stripped those aspects away from, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not centering oneself. It's not ethics and values. And you can find those dojos that still have that modern sport fighting combat with the traditional, scope. But I don't know. It's there's a shift right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back full circle. Speaking of which, I want to go back to your point when you said you're open to taking a mystical approach in your creative process. You've enabled yourself to do that. How do you know when you are doing that dance of just letting go and not being too attached to the end product? Because how do you do that? Because that sounds like a very, I don't think a lot of people can do that. So kind of lead us through, if you don't mind. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but how do
No, it's good.
How do you dance in that sort of that confidence of just letting the creative be creative?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who are fascinated with this concept. I'm sure you've heard of the whole flow thing, right? Like people are talking about you're in the flow, the creative flow, however you want to call it, that zone where you just kind of lose yourself in it, right? And I would say, as somebody who studies movement art as well as sound art, it's something that's, to me, I've experienced in such a physical way through both the different modalities that I've come up with a very almost like a systematized approach to how to get to that. And for me, it's not a good session unless I get there. You know what I mean? So oftentimes, first of all, you have to have the time and energy to devote it to it. And it's a practice. I would say for anyone who's getting serious about being creative, like it's a real practice. And so, I was obsessed with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People for like,
that's a classic.
Oh, it's a classic. And I've reread that thing, I would say at least 30 times in my life. My dad gave it to me when I was 16, changed my life. And it's changed my life every time I've read it since. It still blows my mind when I listen to it now, and I have the original read by him, and he was a genius. That guy was a genius. And he's so humble about it too. He's like, look, I didn't come up with any of this stuff. I just kind of organized it so that you could consume it. But these are self-evident principles is what he says, And so I would say that, it's such a wild world right now that if you want to be serious about making art or training, you want to be serious about training, you need to be organized. Like, because you're still going to have to survive. You're still going to have to pay your bills. You're still going to have to take care of your kids, take care of your partner, drive kids to school. You're still going to have to do all this stuff. You're still going to have to make money. You got to make a lot of money to live. You're gonna have to do all this stuff. And then on top of that, you have to have the energy and the wherewithal to every single day, or as much as possible. My teacher used to say, train every day, get better every day, miss one day, lose 10 days. That's what he used to say to me. Wow. Okay. So that's where I was like, oh shit, like that's exponential, like you don't train for 3 days, you just lost a whole month of training, And I feel it, man. Like I just went for a run today and I hadn't run in a couple days. And before that, I hadn't run in about a week. And like, woof, like when I'm in a zone where I go run every day, I don't run a lot, but I'll run about 3K every day. And that's intense, dude. Like if you can make the time to run 3K every day, but if you miss a couple days and you go run 3K again, holy God, dude, the inertia sets in, like I'm 46 years old and like, it's just like, it goes down, you got to be in it. So you got to be organized enough to have this as a practice that you're doing every day. If you're a guitar player, you're whatever you want to do, drummer. When I don't drum for a few days, man, I get back behind the kit and it's like, oh, it's rough. There's this, like I just read a book on psychology. I reread a book called The Brain That Changes Itself. Very, very good reading, man. It's about 20 years old. I read it about 20 years ago, blew my mind. And I just picked up the audiobook and I'm re-listening to it. And he talks a lot about, there's 2 different modes of remembering. There's like where your neurons have actually like reshaped themselves and you actually have hardware that now matches the thought patterns. And before you get that, there's a temporary neurons that are set up or synapses, I guess, that are set up to fire. But it's like short-term memory versus long-term memory, right? So like once you have that long-term memory, it's like riding a bike, right? Like you have this function inside of you that you can reactivate. But if you're just dabbling in stuff, you don't get to that, So it's got to be a habitual practice. Like you got to be doing it every day, working a lot. Like you got to, that 10,000 hours thing. Like for me with music, I probably did 10,000 hours by the time I was like 22, 23. And I've probably done, I don't know, like 5 times more than that now. Like at this point, like it's just, I've done so much of it. So for me, I have this habitual practice that I'm used to doing, right? But within that habitual practice, you're still going to have terrible days. You're going to have days where you're stressed out with other stuff. And stress is like the ultimate killer of your creativity. Like if your mind is on something else and something's bothering you, forget about it. So you got to manage your stress. You got to make time. You got to have a space to do it. So you got to have the luxury or create the luxury for yourself of having time, like I watched maybe 1 movie last year, I don't spend a lot of time doing activities that take me away from them. For me, the music is like, when I have time, that's what I do, and sometimes I don't feel like doing it. With my partner, I'm blessed to have a partner who trains as well. And so we dance every day. We'll train a little bit. And like, sometimes we're just like, I really don't feel like doing it. We're really tired, whatever. But we'll be like, okay, we got to do it anyway. We just go through the circuits, like hone the system, like, go through some motions. We'll do some drills. We'll do some footwork drills, do a little bit of floor work, put some beats on and we'll just dance to a little bit of house. We'll just catch a groove. Often we'll say we'll just catch a groove, you know? One time we were going into a club, this is like in the 90s, and I think it was Crazy Smooth, the dancer from Ottawa. He's an incredible dancer. Another guy you should have on your show, an incredible artist, you know, and Trevor you should have on your show too. They're incredible artists, you know? And I always remember it was like, I think it was like 1 a.m. We're leaving the club and Yvonne was coming in, Crazy Smooth was coming in. And we're like, oh yeah, we're done. We're cashed. We've been dancing for like 3 hours, you know? And he's like, yeah, I know, I'm so tired too, but I'm just going to go catch a little groove and then go home and get some sleep, you know? But so he made the effort. It was like, one, he was tired, but he still made the effort to go to the club, catch a groove a little bit, even if it was just 10, 15 minutes, but just get your mind into that zone, you know? So I think it's really important to be habituated to taking the leap from going from the real world of dealing with all this, you know, the Babylon system, you know, that's what it is though. Like there's only one word for that, you know, that's what it is. So going from that mindset of like money and stress and like deadlines and everything to like, now I'm going to express myself. And like my mentor, Archie Burnett, who's one of the artists that I interviewed on Gone Monk. And he said, you got to make time every day to take care of your inner child. You know, and that's what artists do. We have to take care of our inner child. We have to make time for what we know is important, even though society doesn't put value on it. The system out there doesn't put value on it. We have to make time for those important things, because if we don't do it, life is going to go by like that and we're going to be done. You know, it's a short ride, man. You got to hit hard. So that's what I would say is like, you got to lay the groundwork, and then to get to the crux of your question, to answer your question, how you allow yourself to become that vessel and allow that energy to go through you. The vessel has to be ready. The system has to be in place. The record button has to be on. Right. You know, if you don't build that whole practice and you don't build you don't go to the club, or you don't turn off the lights and turn the music on and be ready to have your running shoes tied up, and you know what I mean? Like have the time. You have to, you know, have you heard of the book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield? No. You would love this book. It's amazing, man. He's a writer. He's an American writer, and a real tough guy American writer. Like it's something beautiful about, there's a couple guys, there's him, and the other one is the director called, the one who did Twin Peaks. What's the director who did Twin Peaks? Oh, now the name escapes. It'll come right back to me. He also wrote a book about creativity, and his book is called Catching the Big Fish. It's David Lynch, okay, the film director. And David Lynch and Stephen Pressfield are these tough American dudes that there's something about like these tough American guys when they're artists. I love listening to them talk, because they just like, they have this like, they're like Clint Eastwood on the outside, but inside they're like, you know, they're artists. So both of them have written these 2 books. Like, so David Lynch, look it up. It's called Catching the Big Fish. It's a 2-hour audiobook, okay, him narrating it, explaining how meditation informs his practice. And the premise of it is that catching the big fish is getting the big idea. It's what you're asking me about. It's like being that vessel. It's like being open to catching that great idea as an artist, right? And then the other one is Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. And his take on it is slightly different, but he's all about preparation and staging and setting yourself up so that you're ready to do the work. And both amazing books on creativity that I highly, highly recommend. And so, you know, like a lot of these books I've read, like in the last 30 years, I've been reading success literature like crazy, and particularly books about art. Like I'll eat them up, you know, books by dancers, books by musicians, biographies of musicians. And, you know, there's some pretty common themes in all these, in the great artists' work. And, you know, one thing is for sure is that you can't, like, great art doesn't just happen by itself. Like the people who are creating amazing art, they're devoting their lives very seriously, irrespective of whether they're making money from it. You know, because to me, that's completely inconsequential. Some of my favorite artists are broke, you know, they're going to die broke. Yeah. And they're the best. They're the best. They're, for me, the ones that I want to emulate and I want to follow the most, you know? So I think it's a big mistake to conflate success, economic success with great artistry. I think oftentimes those two things don't ever you know, a lot of great artists will die in obscurity, and that's fine. And if that happens to me, that's fine by me. You know, it's fine.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because it's obviously music, art, being creative has been a lifelong devotion for you. You know, you've invested a lot of time and energy and explored so much in just being creative.
And
My question is, can you imagine a world without music, art, dance, and creativity? For you personally, has that sort of thought ever crossed your mind?
I don't want to, man.
Right,
I
of
mean,
course, of course. But I guess I'm just flipping the question because it's almost like, can you picture life without that sort of creative energy?
I don't think so, because I think that's kind of what life is, you know, like if you look even on a microscopic level, you know, I mean, in this book, the psychology book that I just read, The Brain That Changes Itself, he talks about a researcher who was doing work on these snails. And even in these snails, he could see creativity at work, you know, like they would come up against obstacles and the snails would find ways to work around them. And it was even on a cellular level when he was studying how the cells in the brain were working, they were kind of being creative and like adapting and trying to work around. So I just think that's the nature of the world. Like, you know, look at a tree, how, you know, look at all the trees, look at how every tree has its own little shape and it's working around obstacles. It's doing parkour as it's growing, bro. You know, it's like, you know, moving around things. And look at the gnarled trees. Sometimes you'll see them growing through a fence or whatever. Like, I mean, they're adapting, they're creating. So I think that's the nature of the world. Like it's the nature of life. And what's unnatural is working 9 to 5 in a cubicle in an office and thinking that that's your contribution to the world, you know, like, I mean, everyone has so much, and for some people, great. If that's what they love and that's what they want to do, then beautiful. But I mean, for us to say that playing this silly game of money is the only way that we can get ahead, and to focus on material objects as like, you know, the be all and end all of life. I mean, it's just it's a tragedy for me, you know.
For sure. Now, I want to go back to DJing in particular because you know you've had the opportunity to play all over Canada as well as abroad. You've traveled abroad for various sort of creative performances and so on. Particularly in DJing, obviously I know you from your time here in Ottawa at the Mercury Lounge. Can you tell us what your most memorable and defining moment as a DJ? Can you tell us that story? I'm sure there's more than one, but tell us one story that kind of that represents that moment of you like being a DJ.
Yeah, there is one actually. It was a couple of years ago. We were invited with my band Sila and Rise, which is a band where I play with two Inuit throat singers, and we were invited to the Norwegian Arctic. So, you know, you got to fly to Frankfurt, then you got to fly to Oslo, and then from Oslo you got to fly north, and it's like, you know, it would be like a 20-hour drive. It's 2,000 kilometers north to the Arctic Circle in Norway, and the original indigenous inhabitants of the area are called the Sami. Right. And so it's a beautiful culture.
As well in Finland, right?
They're in Sweden, Finland, and I think Russia, it's like a different name, Nenets or something like that there, but Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And so it's basically like you're in the Arctic, you're north of 60. And so we were playing at this festival. It was just a beautiful festival with just a lot of really interesting people from around the world that went to this thing. And actually Buffy St. Marie was one of the musicians. So I got to meet her and hang with her. And they had, who else? There was Jeremy Dutcher was there. And, you know, Tanya Tagak was there. A whole bunch of Canadians that were there. And so we played in this, they called it a lavu. It's like basically like a teepee made with, the traditional ones are made with reindeer skins. And so they built a big one, and it was canvas, but it was big. Like it was like, you know, you could fit 200 people in this thing. And they had a beautiful stage, beautiful sound system. And it was the last night of the festival, and everybody's been partying for 3 or 4 days. And they gave me a DJ set at the end of the night. So it was like everyone was in this tent, like 200 people, you know, and we played a crazy Silla and Rise set. Like it was the craziest set we've ever played. People were pushing up, like the security was pushing people back, and we're ground level with like 200 people in a tent, and like it was intense. Like it was really intense, and it was loud, awesome. And we're just like playing. The girls, like we were in a trance. It was just crazy, you know. And like Tagak was in the front, like, like screaming, Jeremy Dutcher, like I was just like freaking out. You know, and Maxida Marak, who's like a pretty big, you know, star there. She's Sami Swedish. And so I played a remix. So I started DJing right after the set, and people were just lit. Like the whole place was on fire, you know? I played a Maxida Marak remix that I mixed with something else, this like Afro house track, and played her track. And she was in the front, like screaming out. Like it was so next, you know, it was next level. So yeah, like that moment was amazing. But I mean, I've played some incredible parties, like in New York I've played, and you know, Mercury Lounge, almost every Saturday at the Mercury Lounge for years. I was blessed to play, you know, and being with Trevor there and playing with him. And like, it's just beautiful when people dance together, you know, like it's the amount of culture, I think, that has vanished from our social environment in the last year is so astounding. Like it's so deep what we've lost. And I think that how good that was for the cohesion between people, you know, there's so many different people coming together in nightclubs. Like I know, you know, in society at large, you talk about nightclubs, people don't take it seriously, you know. I mean, I also have a career that I do during the day, and I don't talk about my music life. You know, I have a real estate world as well that I'm in, and I have two separate profiles. I don't share any information. There's a few people who know that I do both, but I find if in the music world, people won't take me seriously if I talk about business. In the business world, people won't take me seriously if I talk about music. So I prefer to keep those two things separate. But you know, the amount of intermingling and just like togetherness that comes from people dancing together, it's legendary. You know, one of the most important developments in music to me in the world has been the Loft, which was a club owned by somebody called David Mancuso in New York in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was basically his apartment, but he turned it into a party every Friday and Saturday night. And it was a private club. So you had to be invited to go. You had to have a membership. You had to pay a small fee for the membership. You had a card, an ID card with your face on it. And he ran this club, and it was legendary. And it changed everything because he had eccentric, incredible artists and dancers that would go there, and he wasn't doing it for a commercial enterprise. It was almost like a social experiment. And so some of my teachers in New York, Archie and Bravo, they were regular Loft heads. And so, you know, now there's a whole, you know, people call a style of dance in house called lofting, because, you know, it was so original what the dancers were doing. A lot of them did capoeira, but a lot of them did ballet and jazz, and that mix of a lot of Central American dance, a lot of that, the mix of those styles together created what ended up becoming house dance. When you see house dance now, a lot of it came out of this one particular club, and it was a private club that was a guy's house, right? So, and it was gay, straight, every colored person, every culture, every language. Like it was really open-minded, and people were just there together as people, you know. Mm-hmm. And you know, very different from what we're exposed to in the social media of today. Like this was real. Like we were really hanging out. People were really hanging out together, sweating together, you know, like smelling each other's bodies, and like, you know, germs everywhere. We're in a soup, you know. Right. It's like we were in a biological soup, and it was beautiful. I loved it. I miss it, you know. I really miss it.
Speak to us in regards to Ottawa, and it's obviously Ottawa's changed so much in the last 25 years or so, 30 years, as far as its arts and culture and nightlife. What would you say has been the most sort of dramatic sort of change from your point of view as a creative person and as someone who's part of that industry and culture? How has it changed? What aspect has changed the most?
Well, I would say that the two biggest things that have changed the scene in Ottawa, the social scene and the club scene, would be, first of all, the Mercury Lounge coming in 25 years ago. I think the influence of that club can't be overstated. I mean, it was so ahead of its time when it started. I think it started in 97. And the ideas of, I mean, it was Tim Adams who started it with John Criswick, but it was really John Criswick who's been funding it, often at a loss, for, you know, going on 25 years now. And so, you know, he, like, to me, that was, he made this city. I mean, that's where I met you. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for the Mercury Lounge, right? Yeah. So for poetry, for visual arts, for all the different styles of music, from drum and bass to house to hip hop to, you know, like even the more commercial things, to various different types of cultural music, to even classical music. They were doing the Wolfgang sessions there up until last year, where they were doing stuff with musicians from the NAC. I mean, that club has been, like, to me, the most beautiful and most hopeful part of the city. But the second influence, which I think is much more nefarious, has been the internet. Like, you know, I mean, I clearly remember when email started, and I remember when internet started becoming more of a thing, and I remember when Facebook started, and you know, the social media has had such a negative influence on so many things as far as I'm concerned. But specifically, I think it's had a really negative impact on club culture. Like, it's you know, it changes the game completely. It's much less now about the style of music, the type of, the quality of the music, and it's much more about perceptions. It's much more like high school. Like, it's the popularity contest almost. Everyone's just like, hey, look at me, I'm great, you know. Right. And it's like, fuck, man. I mean, you know, it's I'll always remember it. So one of the people that I've been blessed to meet over the years from the Mercury Lounge, I never would have even probably heard of them if it wasn't for the Mercury Lounge, but I got to open up for them in 2003. Was Kahil El-Zabar and the Chicago Ethnic Heritage Ensemble. I don't know if you've seen them play. Have you?
I think did they perform at the Mercury Lounge? Like, maybe I was at that show.
I think you were. I want to say that you had done a poetry thing before, and somehow I remember seeing you there at the same time.
I think I was probably at that show.
Yeah. So, so that meeting them, you know, I mean, he was the drummer for Nina Simone for like 10 years. He toured with her when he was he was late teens, early 20s, and he lived with her in I think it was in Paris or in Switzerland. He lived with her. And so, I mean, to me, Nina Simone is one of the greatest vocalists of all time. And when I work with Kahil, often I hear her influence in him. You know, I mean, this guy's he's a great jazz. He has the Medal of Honor from France. He's a Chevalier des Arts et Lettres. Like, they knighted him in France, basically. You know, so I mean, the guy is like so next level, and you know, I've been blessed to be influenced by him and get to work with him and working on some music with him now. But you know, about 10 years ago, I remember I just picked up Facebook and did, you know, what we all do. Like, I just went to my home screen and it's pitching me whatever garbage it thinks that I should be interested in, right? And so, and it was like Kahil going like, today marks 30 years that I've been touring for Black History Month every year. For 30 years in February, I've done this tour, okay? And then the next thing was like, why do my feet hurt when I wear these shoes or something like that, you know? And I was like, this is fucked. Like, this is where, like, I gotta, like, what? Like, how can these two things be coming at me with the same amount of weight? You know, it's like
that algorithm has everyone profiled and figured out. At least it thinks it does, right?
Well, and it's an AI. Okay, like, we don't talk about this. Have you seen that movie? Do you trust this computer? No. Check that out, man. Type up, do you trust this computer? Yo, like, it's an artificial intelligence agent. Like, it is intelligently learning what's working, what's not. And the people who've coded this thing, they don't even fully understand what it's doing. So, I mean, look at the American election, the Donald Trump election. Yeah. You know, look at that. Look at some of the things that have happened as a result of this. I mean, it's changing the course of our human existence. I mean, it's literally moving it's changing political systems. Like this is astounding. I mean, we're messing with things that we don't understand, and we've surrendered the public good into the hands of these private corporations to an extent where we're putting ourselves at risk of huge damage.
Mm-hmm.
Even companies like Uber, for example. Like Uber shouldn't be allowed to be a public, or sorry, a private company. Like that's a transit system. Like that's not a company. That's like the government needs to just own that. You know what I mean? Like right. It's at one point we have to start looking after the public good again. And I mean, some people think that's ludicrous and that's left-wing heresy. But to me, I mean, there has to be a point where we go, okay, listen, this has to be done in the service of public interest.
How do you see the role? Because AI is here, it's here to stay, along with a slew of other, technological advancements, and it's being used obviously for learning and development, for education, so on and so forth. And it's used for just about everything else. But I guess the question I'm asking is, technology is becoming more and more dominant in our day-to-day life. We're all addicted to our smartphones, whether we want to admit it or not. As a creative person, how do you find that balance between just disconnecting from your phone, or disconnecting from technology? Do you do that? Do you kind of have that sort of discipline and hygiene, I guess they call it, in terms of being able to just take a break and ground yourself?
I think it's a double-edged sword. I think in some ways it's a tool that can really, all of this stuff, all the technologies. Look what we're doing. I mean, we wouldn't even be able to talk right now.
Right.
But I think you have to use it the right way, and you have to kind of take a step back and take the 10,000 foot view of it and go, okay, like how can this benefit the process, because I think it's really easy to fall prey to the private interests. I mean, we're really being manipulated in a lot of ways by this. We're being manipulated by the banks. We're being manipulated by the media. I mean, I can't even listen to CBC anymore. I mean, it's become like, lately the CBC to me has been a pharmaceutical ad. It's like it's just I can't even listen to it. It's so disingenuous to me. It's like they've thrown out everything, and it's just their messaging. They're constantly messaging at you, and all of these private interests, like Google, I mean, Google, as somebody referred to it the other day, as an opinion curation device. It's not even a search engine. It's a thought curation, algorithm, basically. And it's like we just have to have media literacy, like, to the max with this stuff. We have to be able to study it, talk about it, teach our kids about why we're being exposed to this type of information, right? But for me, like, I use this thing all the time. Like right now it's on the calendar. That's like, I would say the second most used app for me. This is the number one, the notes, Right. Like that's what I use it for. Like it's a great piece of paper, you don't waste any paper with it. It's always there. You can jot down ideas. The notes, I have probably about 20, 30 notes. I've got ideas for text, ideas for songs. I've got, schedule my daily goals, like self-talk stuff that I want to go over, mission statements, all the things that I want to remember, that I want to blast myself with. And I would say that's the thing I use it for the most. Facebook for me is more like it's an advertising medium for me. I mean, I know for a lot of people, they're putting a lot of their personal information, very little personal information of mine goes out on there. It's really like it's a way for me to try to reach people, and it allows me to communicate with a lot of people. So, I think you have to take it for what it is, which is it's a product that's you're the product. Like, Facebook you're the resource on Facebook. Like, it's just a mechanism to draw you in so they can get your data and they can get your attention, right? So they're selling you stuff and they're using your data to create more products, to curate to you in a more efficient manner, and to sell ads, right? So, just like when on the radio, it was more transparent because commercials would come on. This is much more insidious, And hey, man, sometimes I get taken for a ride. Like my my wife is fond of reminding me that I ordered a pair of socks off of like Alibaba or something like that. It was a Facebook ad that popped up, and it was like perfectly curated to me, like natural movement. Yo, it was so deep into my mind. I was like, this is great. Like there were these socks with like fingers for your feet, and they were like Kevlar reinforced, and you could go run outside with them. It looked like, I was like, this is dope. And it was only like 20 bucks for 2 pairs. I'm like, sign me up, like send them my credit card. Nothing happened for a really long time. I started sending messages to them, and like I wasn't getting replies. Finally, these things showed up. It was like a joke, dude. Like you take them out, they're like these tiny little things, and they were like a kid's sock made, like it was like paper thin. I was just like, this is crazy. Like they totally took me for a ride, you know. They nailed it, you know. So
yeah, no, the targeting on a lot of these platforms is fascinating, because they know all the essential data points and their profile, their end user. You mentioned in this interview we've had this conversation, you've mentioned a lot in terms of personal development, creative development. You've read a lot of books in terms of personal development. You mentioned the seven highly effective
7 habits.
Stephen R. Covey, I think it is.
Yeah, Stephen Covey.
Sorry. Now speak to us about, in terms of as a creative person, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given in regards to professional development? Because you mentioned professional development through and through, you know, in terms of as a DJ, ensuring that you know the name of the musician you're playing, and so on. So you have a particular standard, and you clearly do. Now speak to us, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given in regards to not just professional development, but artistic development?
When I think I was about 9 years old, I was living in Montreal, and I was trying to repair a bicycle tire. And this old neighbor of mine, Monsieur Suri was his name, and he came over and he was watching me work. And he was just kind of, I could tell he wasn't happy with how I was doing. I was trying to get this tire off the rim. Right. And he was just kind of like, you know, an old guy watching a little kid doing something, you know. And he was like, let me show you. He's like, if you're going to do something, he's like, you got to do it right or don't do it at all. Wow. And the way he said at all, you know. And I was like, you know, it hit me like it recorded in there like deeply, you know. And periodically I'll find that maybe it's just my temperament, but I tend to be the guy that gets it done fast, you know, like I'm always trying to be efficient and get stuff done. But I think with art in general, you have to like Sidney Beckett, the one of the fathers of jazz, was a soprano sax player, clarinet player, and he wrote his autobiography is called "Treat It Gentle," and the quote from the book is, you know, yeah, I can be mean and I can do all this other stuff, but not when it comes to music. When it comes to music, it's a thing you got to take care of. You got to treat it gentle, you know. And I think that's a really good piece of advice that has proven time and time again. When I've had issues, it's because I'm not treating it gentle enough. So, you know, it's to do it the right way, in terms of like come at it with the right intention, give it the right amount of energy, give it the right amount of time, and take your time with it and be patient with it too, you know, because oftentimes you know, as artists, when we're starting out, we have the one thing that all artists have, even beginner artists, is you have a vision for what you think is great. You know, as a martial artist, maybe you see a great fighter, you know, you watch a GSP and you're like, yeah, that speaks to you. His elegance speaks to you, or his aptitude speaks to you. Or maybe it's a painting you see, or you hear a poem and you're like, wow, the way that the words are crafted, the way that it comes together, it's like this vision of beauty that you have, right? But then comes the work, right? And so like you were asking me about the how to get into that zone, and how does it become a mystical experience? The way it becomes mystical is through the mundane, you know. Through the mundane, you build the system that's going to allow it eventually to take off, you know. And if you haven't done all that work and you haven't been very considerate and very careful in how you're building the system, you're not going to be able to have that stroke of genius, or that spark's not going to be able to happen, because you have to have the vehicle in place, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to treat it gentle, man. You got to take your time. You got to learn a lot. Like it's about to me, find people that are doing what you want to do, or that are even just a little bit further ahead of you. And oftentimes people think of a mentor like, oh, it's got to be like, the ideal person. There's a quote, I forget who said it, but it's from a negotiating book that I read recently, and he goes, never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. So it's like, never take advice from someone you wouldn't want to trade places with. And that's true, but it doesn't have to be that you want their life. It could be that you just want to understand their creative process, or you appreciate something that they're doing. It could be maybe the person communicates well, or maybe they dance well, or maybe they dance well at one style. Maybe they're a good popper, or maybe just their isolations are good, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they have nice teeth, like whatever it is that you want to learn, right? So like, find something that you want to learn from someone, and then just try to be open enough to learn it, And I think if you do that, then it's just going to be a never-ending journey of learning more and more. And for me, I think all the people that I've collaborated with, like, they've just taught me so much, It's wonderful.
In this creative journey that you've been on, what has been the most challenging hurdle for you through and through? What's that one hurdle that you think is the hardest to leap over?
Well, I would say that one of the things I've had a really hard time with is, especially when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I really bought into the notion that I had to make money from it, And I think that's so destructive. Like, it's so, it comes from everywhere, dude. It's like, if you even like attempt to do any art, you want to make a little mix or whatever, every person that is going to be rationalizing and explaining to you why you should try to do it full time, or why you got to ditch your job. And like, I mean, there's so much negative stuff around this. To me, it's one of the greatest impediments to people creating art, is that we have this notion that unless you're David Guetta in front of 100,000 people, you're not really a DJ, Right. But some of the greatest DJ performances that I've witnessed have been in a little restaurant, on Sussex at 11 at night, when there's hardly anyone out, on a Thursday night or Wednesday night, and the magic is happening, and there's even 2 or 3 people that are listening, but it's a beautiful vibe, some of the best dance pieces that I've seen have been in empty theaters where there was 5 people in the crowd. Wow. Some of the greatest poems have been in empty rooms, right. Some of the best books that I've read are tiny little runs, like 100 runs, and I bought it from the author himself. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there is no relationship to how great a piece of art is to how much of a listenership it has. To me, anyway, I've decided that there's no relationship. It's luck. It's being in the right place at the right time. It's how many rapacious, opportunistic promoters and people like that have caught wind of your thing and have decided that they want to ride your coattails, like how many of those people are around and how they can blow that up to their people. You know what I mean? Like, I know, because you're laughing. You can't fake that smile. I know it's hitting you. You know exactly what I'm saying, man. The culture vultures, That's right. There's a lot, and they're there, and they're ready to ride. They want to ride the coattails, So like, how many of those people you can get excited about your project, that determines more about how well commercially a project is going to do versus how great the art is, And so, but and it's not to say that some art can't be great. Like, I happen to think that The Weeknd is a fantastic artist. Like, it was interesting to see the amount of vitriol and negativity that came out after that halftime show that he played, right? Because I actually think he's brilliant. Like, I think he's a brilliant singer. I think lyrically, I don't think he's scratching the surface of what he could do in terms of moving people and putting messages across. I don't even think he's there yet. I hope he will be one day, because I think his voice and his artistry, strictly from an expressivity and cultivation of the voice and the method of singing, and like, I think he's brilliant, man. Like, he's brilliant. I listen to it, and it gives me shivers listening to him, So, something like that, it can happen that you get great. Nina Simone, for example, by the time, by her late stages of her career, she was quite well known,
Right.
Um,
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, in terms of audience development, if we could use that term, what is it with the Canadian audience sometimes not really? Do you think Canadians value Canadian artists in terms, and by value, I don't necessarily mean, um, okay, well, let me give you the context here. It seems to me that there's always been, I guess this applies more to pop music or what's on the radio. Seems like Canadians tend to prefer American musicians than some of their own local musician. I know that's a big generalization, but from your experience, from what you've seen and so on, what are your thoughts on that? Is there some truth to that? And if so, why is it that we as Canadians don't support our local Canadian artists? If it's local
yeah.
in the city, if it's, Toronto, Montreal, or somewhere in some rural part of the country.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the answer to the question is that it has very little to do with people's tastes and preferences, and it has a lot to do with the media environment that we're living in. So when I was about 16, I was producing music and, I had a 4-tracker and I was making records, and I got in my head that like this music was great. I made some great stuff. Finally, I was able to really get something great, and I was going to get it played on the radio, So, it's like, it's the 80s, and, I'm like going to radio stations, asking to meet the program managers, and I was sitting across from these people and like just trying to talk to them. And I just didn't understand, because I was basically asking the question you were asking. I was like, like I have this great thing. We're playing at night. People are coming out. I got like 200 people came on my show on Saturday, and like, people are into this music. Like, can you play it on the radio,
Right.
And that's when I realized that the radio stations, I mean, apart from CBC and college radio, but the commercial radio stations, they're like a promotional arm of a very big American machine. They're the Canadian promotional team. Right. for the American companies, right? So these are commercial products that have been pumped in. The only reason you hear any Canadian music on radio was that since the 70s, we've had this thing called CanCon, which is, the CRTC has these regulations. There's a certain amount of Canadian content. And interestingly, now a lot of the internet radio, there's no CanCon. So, I mean, it's been a downward spiral ever since the internet came in, and the CRTC hasn't even begun to really be able to get a foothold in the digital realm. So basically, I mean, there's a PR problem, and then there's a cultural issue. And the PR problem is that, we're never going to be able to compete. It's like on Netflix. I mean, Canadian shows, how many Canadian shows are you watching on Netflix? I mean, it's exactly, that's what I'm talking about, right? So they're operating in such a bigger sphere. I mean, it's so much. If you do something anything you do in the States, if you're an artist and you have 10,000 fans in Canada, if you were American, you would have 100,000 fans,
right.
So often I compare artists that are, kind of my peers and people that I work with, and they're like in a different league from me in terms of how many fans they have and how much money they're making and everything else, right? So it's a much bigger pond, right? So in terms of the Canadian stuff, I think, it's different in the different genres. I think Canadian rock has always done pretty well, and people have been into that kind of sound for a long time. It's not really an arena that I'm not really drawn to very much. I mean, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, that was certainly something that was much more present in my life, because, playing in bands and everybody was into it. So, I kind of played in that sphere a lot. But underground music in Canada and club music in Canada is very fringe, I mean, most people are not that into it, and it's not really a very popular thing. If you look at it, like the Junos were just announced, the Junos were announced, and like my collaborator and friend Amoy from Toronto got a nom, and I'm so proud of her, And I went on the Juno page and I was looking for it, and I'm looking, and I'm like, it's like best new breakout group, and it's like American bands, and then there's like, best new this, best new that, and he's scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And I'm like, oh my God, like, and like just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Like it was like, 50 or 60 categories down is like best reggae recording. I'm like, best reggae. She did it, she did it. Yeah. And then like it keeps scrolling down. It's like best world music, and it's like all of my friends and collaborators. I'm like, yay! It's just like we're trivial. I mean, we're nothing. In the grand scheme of things here. I mean, we don't have any money behind any of it. I mean, the amount of money that you have to spend to get stuff heard these days is just it's ludicrous. So. To answer your question, I think, there's that. And then there's culturally as well. I mean, Canada's changed a lot in the last 30 years. And with the various waves of immigration that have come in, a lot of the culture has come in and it's much more vibrant than it was 30 years ago, so it's beautiful. It's great. But the traditional Canadian music, you think of Gordon Lightfoot, you think of the Tragically Hip, right. You think of bands like that, I mean, it's a very specific, very narrow niche of musicality, right? So, and some of it's beautiful, like Bruce Coburn guitar playing. I mean, a phenomenal player, right? Like there are some, some great artists out there, but it's not a very broad spectrum of sound, put it that way. So what is a traditional, so if you're somebody who grows up listening to the Tragically Hip, are you going to go to a drum and bass show and are you gonna be really into like a dubstep act? Like, I mean, people don't even know, they have no reference for this stuff,
Very true. And it's unfortunate because why limit your scope to just one genre when there's so many, right? It's like language acquisition in this country. It's like some people only speak English and they don't want to learn French and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you want to learn French? It's
well, because it's uncomfortable, right? And people don't like being uncomfortable.
Enough, so I mean, I guess it's just that exposure to another language. You get to express yourself. It's just part of that learning that you speak of. I think is
hey, yeah. There's nothing but upside to me, to diversity and to culture and to learning. I mean, it's like I've devoted my life to it. So I agree with you 100%. But having interacted with a lot, like I had a lot of I had a lot of bad, crappy jobs before I, like when I was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, I always had these jobs. Like I was, doing rough frontline jobs, like working as a dishwasher in restaurants and working as, stocking shelves. And, I drove taxi for a while. I mean, I've done a lot of, just, the essential jobs that are keeping the country going kind of thing, for years and years, before I was able to rise and get better jobs and make more money. And, I interacted with a lot of people who, were doing those jobs and I really understand the perspective. And it's like, for them, they're comfortable with what they were exposed to. They were exposed to a very narrow field of music and art. And for a lot of people also, like, it's tough, man. Like life is tough, So it's like, I can't blame someone for not having the time or energy to get into new stuff because they're just busy making a living, man. It's like, that's the last thing on their mind. They got to pay the rent. They got, they got issues. They got like, there's all different layers of trauma of all along their lives that they're experiencing. And life is tough, man, so it's just, that's the only way that changes. And the reason that bigger centers, people tend to be more open-minded in bigger centers, I think it's just proximity to lots of different people. Like to me, New York, like, hip hop could have never happened anywhere else in the world. Like it was New York. Like if you take the subway from Manhattan and you go to Utica in Brooklyn, like along there, you've got every like cultural group that's influenced hip hop. You've got little areas all along from, almost every stop on that metro line is like dominated by a certain, minority group. And they're all taking the subway together and they're influencing each other and they're opening each other's minds, so I think that's the most beautiful, hopeful thing about the big urban centers and about urban music is that, people are together, and that's really, really healthy and really good, I think, so.
Totally. I really appreciate your time. I have one last question for you, and I think you've somewhat answered it earlier on, but what inspires you to keep on being creative?
Death, brother. Wow. Memento mori. You know, think about death every day. Like I'm really into stoicism. Yeah. I don't know if you've checked out Ryan Holiday. Stephen Pressfield is one of them as well, but check out Ryan Holiday. He's written a few books. And so one of the books is called The Obstacle is the Way. Another one's called Ego is the Enemy. And he's a writer who has basically devoted himself to spreading Stoicism. So I don't know if you know about Stoicism, but it's this 2,000-year-old ancient philosophy from Rome, basically 2,000 years ago. And there's a few seminal writers, like Marcus Aurelius was one, and Seneca was another one. And so, you know, the philosophy is about just basically, if you can sum it up, it's like make do with what you got, do the best you can with what you got, you know? And one of the sayings that they had was memento mori, which means remember death. So it's like, remember death every day, because like, you know, and that you find in Buddhism as well. Tibetan Buddhism has it, meditations on death. All Buddhist, all Buddhist texts have references to death and how, you know, the shortness of life, you know, basically. So like, yeah, I mean, every day I get up and it's just like, I just thank God and well, thank the universe, whatever you want to call it. Right. Just express gratitude, you know, for what we have and for this opportunity to create. And I just feel like life is so short, bro. I'm like lit up. As soon as I hang up, I'm running over there and I'm going to start working. You know, I'm scoring a movie for an indigenous filmmaker from Arizona. I'm doing, I've got the solo Rise Ashen record I'm working on a second Silla and Rise record. We just got a Radio Star Maker grant. So we got 20 grand for promotion of the album. Nice. So it's the first time I'm ever going to spend 20 grand on promoting a record. So it's going to be fun. Like we've hired a publicist in Toronto. We're going to kind of play like the big leagues a little bit, you know, like actually have other people doing all the promotional work for us. So, you know, I got some records with Trevor Walker I'm working with this kid, Thielen Kiknoswe, who's 16 years old. He's amazing. He's indigenous artist from here, young writer, dancer. He's incredible. So working on some records with him. I'm so lit up, dude. I can't, there's not enough time, you know, like usually I put the kids down and everything, and by about 9 o'clock I get going, and like I'm just gonna go till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, you know, and just like rock out, man. Just like make some stuff happen.
Right on, man. Well, thank you very much for your time. Where can we find you online?
You know, look me up on Facebook, Rise Ashen Music on Facebook, or if you got SoundCloud, that's a great way to check out, you know, my music. I post a lot of stuff on SoundCloud, you know, Instagram, Rise Ashen. Just come say hi. If you want to say hello, I'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much, Jay. Garmamie, thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. So I'm looking forward to, you know, possibly interviewing you again, maybe once.
Oh, dude.
A follow-up interview series.
I'm looking forward to hearing more stuff from you, man. And I've been catching up on some of the shows. It's great, man. You've had some really wonderful, you know, movers and martial artists. It's fascinating. So I'm definitely gonna listen to the whole thing.
Right on, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me, Garmamie.
Cheers, man. Take care.
And you're a great poet, by the way. I used to really enjoy seeing you perform, man.
Thank you. Man.
You're the tallest guy on that stage, and it was like you're this towering poet, bro. I want you to bring it back. Bring it back.
You know what? I think I'll do that. It's been a while.
You should.
Been a while.
You should. I used to enjoy hearing you speak, man. It was beautiful. So
I really appreciate that, my friend. Take care, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.